But the loser will end up going to the lower finals here, Reed, and they'll get another chance to get into the championship match as the tournament progresses.
Right. So yeah, you think of the objective for this, first portion of our top 8. It's to be competing in that championship match. Easy way to do it for these players: win one more, you're in the finals, you're in the championship match. Or you could lose and have another crack at it. This is double elimination, and these players have put themselves in very prime position.
Yeah.
By winning their first 2 matches today.
Both of these players on Omnath Adventures. And before we got into this match, actually, Rich Hagen, one of the producer, of course, and the man that many people will be very familiar with, pointed out to me that we are now looking at 2 of the 3 remaining people in this tournament, or when we get to the final, the lower final. It'll be these 2 left, and then 1 other person from the lower bracket. So that it's a little complicated. My brain is certainly very smooth, and I don't really fully grasp how this sort of stuff works at the best of times. But it is interesting. It puts some perspective on just how far these 2 have advanced, in that they are already in such an enviable position when it comes to snagging that championship.
So in other words, even if one of these players loses every game they play for the rest of the event, they'll finish in, I believe, 3rd place. So really strong performance.
And that's why Reed Duke's fractally wrinkled brain is here to even out the bowling ball that I'm lugging around in my head.
Don't be so hard on yourself. Your brain is very lumpy. Very lumpy brain.
Thank you, Reed. You know what? Sometimes I just need to hear someone say that to me, and I appreciate it, mate. A mulligan here for Gabriel and Nassif, hitting the rope nice and early, setting that precedent for us here. And this one, it's fine, right? Lucky Clover, Brazen Borrower, a couple of lands. This is a deck that doesn't mind an excess of lands, to a point, of course.
Yeah, most definitely. You have your mana, you have your Lucky Clover. That's the 2 most important pieces in place. And if the top of your library delivers the right stuff, you don't mind being down on cards, because the doubling effect of Lucky Clover, or even resolving a single copy of Omnath or Escape to the Wilds, can easily bring you back from that initial deficit.
Fave wishes off the top here for Gabe, and Aaron is going to be able to kick things off with a turn 2 Lucky Clover, which is the textbook start. Like, this is absolutely perfect here for Gertler. He'll be very happy with that.
Yep, and on the play, 7 cards on the play, turn 2 Lucky Clover. Doesn't get any better than that.
Not much. And now back to Nassif, who also has a Lucky Clover that he can play on turn 2. How's his looking? He's drawn pretty well since that mulligan.
Yes, now both players are the Bone Crusher Giant, which will basically mean we won't see much in the way of creatures sticking on the battlefield in the early portion of this game.
Yeah.
Both players also with a refill type of card. For Aaron Gertler, it's Escape to the Wilds. A little more direct, a little more potent. For Nassif, it is Fae of Wishes. So a couple of big factors to keep an eye on in the immediate term is, number 1, can Aaron Gertler find that 5th source of mana? Number 2, can Gabriel Nassif find some creative routes to take when he does his double granted turn?
So both players hitting their land drops. You can see that this Edgewall Innkeeper is not being exposed to danger, which is smart stuff from Aaron, because you do really want to draw at least 1 card off your Innkeeper. So the idea often is to play it and then immediately follow it up with Adventure Creature, so you get that value. Now here, we're going to set Aaron back a turn or 2 here by bouncing both copies of Lucky Clover with Petty Theft. So that puts Gabe in a decent spot here.
Yeah, kind of just a mana play here. All it's going to do is force Aaron to commit his next turn to replaying the Clovers. But when Nassif had nothing to do with his mana, at least it kind of ensures that he's not going to fall behind on the board, and give him a nice window to resolve a 4-mana card of his choice on this turn, either Granted or Omnath.
Yeah, and I think given the fact that, Nassif doesn't have any tools to interact with some of the stuff that Aaron might do, if Gabe's worried about an Escape to the Wilds or something like that, then there's nothing he can do about it. So he may as well just, trade his 2 mana for Aaron's 4 mana there. And we'll see here. Oh, we've definitely got Omnath mana. So we're going to go to the sideboard, or are we going to play out the big jelly bean? Looks like it might be Granted here.
Yeah, it's a tough play. Something you said a moment ago, Riley, is you want to ensure that you're getting value when you play your cards. So just as Aaron Gertler didn't expose his Edgewall Innkeeper earlier, I think Gabriel Nassif is not exposing his Omnath to a possible, copied Stomp. And maybe he's waiting for a turn where he could play Omnath and a landfall trigger, Omnath and 2 landfall triggers, or maybe he just has some idea of where he wants to take this game, and that involves reaching for his sideboard right now.
Well, let's have a look at what is in Gabe's sideboard here. You can see it in your screen. He does have he's got a land there. It's not Fabled Passage, it's Branchloft Pathway. And after picking up that flip land, maybe Escape to the Wilds is where he's headed next. Yeah,
interesting.
That's just a nice value granted there.
Now, I think if Aaron Gertler had only played 1 Lucky Clover, for sure the first thing Nassif is going for is a Return to Nature or some kind of equivalent disenchant effect. But being, a little bit behind on the draw with a mulligan and against 2 Lucky Clovers, I think he's just not really interested in engaging in that particular battle. And he's just going to say, you know what, I'm going to develop my own side of the battlefield and hope that you don't have the number of adventure creatures to really take full advantage of your position.
The eagle-eyed viewers watching will have noticed the 2 copies of Chainweb Arachnia in Gabe's sideboard. Because often they play like 3 copies of Mystical Dispute. Why is it now Chainweb Arachnia as a 2 of a card that can't be got with granted? What explains the uptick in this card?
Well, this is an answer to the Rogues deck, and actually not so much Seth Manfield's particular take on Rogues, but more just a traditional, like, I'm going to attack you with flying creatures type of Rogues deck. And the reason that this is so effective is that you don't have to draw it. If it's just in your library anywhere, the Rogues deck will mill it into your graveyard for you, and you'll get this free, repeatable, defensive, advantage creature.
That actually makes a lot of sense, because of course you're never going to run out of fuel for it, and you never, as you say, you don't have to draw it. They mill over it, and then they mill the cards that you need to escape it. So that's some hot technology right there. And obviously, Rogues didn't make the biggest splash at this tournament. It made there was one person playing it in Seth, and Seth Manfield. He did very well with it, but that's some hot technology in the case that there was the soaring Thought Thieves were going to take over standard here. Right now, it's Beanstalk Giant with Fertile Footsteps, basically free with the 2 copies of Lucky Clover.
Yeah, Aaron Gertler just has it all at this point. This is the situation that you want to be in, where you have basically the high numbers of both mana and plays available to you. And when you're just Beanstalk Gianting, getting back your mana right away and then using it on something powerful, this is where it's almost impossible to stop the freight train that is Tamer Adventures.
And now we see another granted, this time on the other side of things. A Shredded Sails as an answer for Gabriel Nassif's copy of Lucky Clover, and a negate to keep you safe in later turns. And then finally, Escape to the Wild. So a value-laden monstrosity of turn there for Aaron Gertler, who is going to shatter away his opponent's Lucky Clover. And that's bad news for Gabe.
Yeah, this is basically just a clinic. Like, if you get to watch 1 game of Omnath Adventures to sort of get an idea of what this deck is capable of, this is a great one. Aaron Gertler just on the play, 7-card hand, Lucky Clover, Escape to the Wilds, and we are off. We're off to the races. Nassif, to his credit, has a decent position, got some value with his initial granted and Escape to the Wilds, but I think it's different orders of magnitude of how much they're doing on each turn.
And this is very familiar for anyone who was playing or either with or against Tamer Adventures pre-rotation. It's not a deck that lost too much to rotation, just the mana, which obviously is still fine if you were adding a 4th color. But Omnath certainly a powerful addition to a deck that already was amongst the best in standard. And it's still very, very good here. So Nassif with about 400 cards in hand. This deck very rarely runs out of resources, thanks to Edgewall Innkeeper, thanks to Escape to the Wilds, replacement Lucky Clover, and now we're going to see another petty theft, getting rid of both of these clovers on Aaron's side. So not a bad attempt at a recovery here from Gabe, but is it going to be enough, Reed?
No, I mean it's tough. We saw that play earlier, Riley, where it's like I'm going to pay 2 mana, set you back 4 mana. That's great. That's fine and good. But now the situation has changed, and Aaron Gertler is now untapping with 10 lands on the battlefield. 4 mana is a blip on the radar. I mean, this is not really going to slow him down in any kind of meaningful way that can allow Gabriel Nassif to get back in the game.
So Lucky Clover comes back once again. And we're going to see here another copy of Branded. Aaron has half his sideboard in his hand now. Another copy of Shredded Sails. And
so
wants in future here to buy it back.
As we saw Nassif try to circumvent this fight, you know, Aaron Gertler had 2 Lucky Clovers, and Nassif was like, you know what? I'm not going to win by trying to kill these one at a time. We're seeing things from a much different perspective from Aaron Gertler, where he's ahead and he's like, let me shut the door. Let me make sure Nassif does not have that tool that he needs to accomplish what I'm accomplishing. So the granted, you know, you split it. You get 1 card that sets your opponent back, 1 card that progresses your game plan. And this is a pattern that's, you know, it's just really hard to catch up with, keep pace with.
So here's Omnath, in conjunction with, of course, the partner in crime, Fabled Passage. Gain some life, gain some mana. And from here, we could even see an Escape to the Wilds, maybe the Bone Crusher Giant in order to kill the opposing Edgeworld Innkeeper. But Gabe certainly, he has fallen behind a little bit here. Aaron is sitting with his snoot out in front and looking to be in a good position to, as you say, continue to advance his game plan.
Now, this Omnath, this is the one thing that Gabriel Nassif has that Aaron Gertler does not have. So,
very true.
You know, that's a ray of hope. Let me try to use this one weapon to maximum, you know, potency and see if that's a way that I can get back to parity. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, frankly, Riley, whichever player is taking their turn is looking good because the turns are so powerful here. But I think the reality of the situation is that Aaron Gertler has more mana, he has more Lucky Clovers, he has more cards at his fingertips, and his turns are going to be more powerful. So, you know, every time we see Nassif try to battle back, he's going to eventually pass the turn, and Aaron's going to get further ahead. And, you know, it's on Nassif to try to break that pattern and prove me wrong.
Edgeworld Innkeeper is going to draw a couple of cards, Bone Crusher Giant, in addition to that Fey of Wishes here. So this kind of reminds me of a game of EDH where I don't know how much EDH you play, Reed, but often the person whoever's turn it is, they feel like they're winning always. And then as soon as they pass the turn, someone else starts going off doing ridiculous stuff. You're like, oh, actually, well, they're the one who's, you know, the enemy of the table. And then it's your turn. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to win. Don't even worry about it. So it's kind of funny how this, you know, the role of this ship means that we are constantly reevaluating who's ahead. But I think you're right in saying that Gertler does feel firmly favoured here with this double Lucky Clover that he's got, even if he is lacking an Omnath.
Yep, so here's Omnath hitting the bin, meaning that one, you know, that one weapon that was unique to Gabriel Nassif's battlefield, that's gone.
Some good use out of it, though. Gain some life, gain some mana, and a card as well. So here's Boney G. Just as a 4/3. No Innkeeper to draw extra cards here for Aaron. And what are we going to see here? Are we going to see a Petty Theft? Or another Innkeeper, maybe? No, that was in the bin, that one. Okay.
It can be really overwhelming sometimes. You know, if it's your first time playing with this deck, you find yourself in a situation like this where it's like, geez, I have 12 mana, I have 6 cards in my hand, I have the Adventure Zone, I have the Escape to the Wild Zone, I have my sideboard that I'm working with. How do I parse all these options? And it's tough. I mean, the players, sometimes the turns are so complicated that your best hope is that you can play them at 80 or 90% proficiency, and you're not going to get everything right every time. But one thing that you can sort of look to is when I have so much card advantage, and frankly, when my opponent has so much card advantage, the best thing I can do is try to translate that into a mana advantage or a tempo advantage, a board presence advantage, whatever term you want to use. So I do think that things like copying Petty Theft are good techniques to look for when you want to just, like, you know, press your advantage and make sure your opponent can't get the traction that they need.
fight on a different axis, sure, where you may have the tool. Like, you're trying to out-resource a Tamer Adventures deck even before rotation was difficult, and now with 4 colors and with Omnath, it's even harder. So if you can fight on different axis and take these new novel unorthodox lines, I mean, that's what's going to make things a lot easier for you. Well, not necessarily a lot easier, but it's definitely going to give you a different, as I say, different approach, different angle of attack. Here's a once and future. Can buy back 2 cards with Adamant. And Bone Crusher Giant is one of them.
We did hear from our news desk, Aaron Gertler predicted that the chess clock was going to be an influential aspect of this match. In so many words, he predicted, I'm going to beat Gabriel Nassif by Gabriel Nassif running out of time. And, you know, I think that's a rather specific prediction. I don't know if that's the way this is going to end, but it does go to show you what's going through the heads of these players as they enter into what's going to be a war. And it's something to think about. Like, not only is it important who wins this game number 1, but it can also matter like how efficiently they do it, how much chess clock they have going into game 2 and a possible game 3.
I love the chess clock. I mean, speaking personally, this is just my opinion, but I love the chess clock in the. I know it has its detractors. I know people don't enjoy always playing with the tick 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 of it on the side there. You know, compared to paper Magic, where it's very different. But I love it. It's the great equalizer.
Yeah, I think it's a feature of online play, and you know, something I think that we will sometimes miss if and when we go back to playing Magic in a paper setting.
I think so. I hate those games where you sit there and one person takes up 80% of the game time, and then you go to turns, and it's like, well, you know, if I'd had an equal amount of time to the time that you took, then I would have won that easy. I love it. I mean, I know. Again, I know it has its detractors, but I think the chess clock is fantastic. I love the way that it influences games.
So tuning back to our battlefield here, Aaron Gertler fetches his last remaining basic lands in order to get the second landfall trigger on Omnath. So again, you see among the millions and millions of options available to Aaron Gertler for how to play this turn, he's prioritizing, how do I get more mana? Because the more mana I have, the more actions I could take. The more actions I could take, the better position I'm in.
So another Fae of Wishes here, granted, getting a neutralize. And Aaron thinking about which other card he wants. I mean, we've seen a lot of different Omnath. Well, we've seen a lot of the same Omnath decks, to be fair. But where one of the big differences has been is in the sideboard, you know, and that doesn't have the same impact as a different sideboard usually does. So often, like, if you've got, let's say, the same archetype, the same broad macro archetype, maybe a couple of differences in the main deck, but with wildly different sideboards, that can really have a huge impact on the way that post-board games play out, right? Because you can build in a certain way to build certain decks, whatever. But different sideboards with this list in particular are hugely impactful because you have access to that sideboard in 100% of the games. Because you've got those, the wish cards, it means that if you build your sideboard in the right way, you can play on a completely different level to your opponent as early as game number 1.
Yeah, and as you said, constructing that sideboard is a fascinating aspect of this deck, fascinating aspect of this tournament. When you're thinking about your Fae of Wishes, I think the first thing you think about is like, what's the plan? What are the couple of cards that I'm going to most often under default circumstances where just turn 4 I grant it on an empty board. And I think most common we go for Escape to the Wild, sometimes Negate, Mystical Dispute, depending on the matchup. But then the next level is like, what are the specific situations that I might find myself in where I need a specific answer, I need a way out? And you have to parse, like, is there a good option that I can put in my sideboard? How often will I use it? How likely is that to turn a loss into a win? And, the way that players have made these decisions differently has been a pretty meaningful and determining factor in who advances in this event.
So Aaron here with, I don't even know how many cards available. Half of them are in hand, half of them are in the exile zone. And we're going to see even more value here for the American as triple stomp here takes care of one of these Fae of Wishes and also takes out the Edgewall Innkeeper. I mean, I don't know how you'd ever get through a turn. Look at the decision paralysis. So many glowing cards. So many glowing cards. There aren't enough hours in the day to click on all these glowing cards.
No, and the closer the game, the more stressful it is, because it can really matter. Like, oh, I have to make every one of these decisions with pinpoint accuracy to make sure I don't blow it. At this point, I think we've moved past that. Aaron Gertler is so far ahead, and each turn that passes puts him further ahead. So he can kind of just, go as fast as he can click and throw things onto the battlefield. You see that he set himself up with Fling in case he does see an opportunity where the opponent gets a little bit low, or he can throw a Beanstalk Giant out there and then at Gabriel and Nassif. I guess he should be thinking about, like, is there any way that Nassif steals this one from me? I don't think that's very likely with his life total at 25, but just basically, executing the finishing blows here.
Another stomp here. 2 upstairs, 4 at the Omnath. Such is the power of double Lucky Clover. And Nassif knocked down to 20. Still going to gain... No, not going to gain any extra mana because of that, because of the timing of that stomp there. So now left with a bunch of cards on adventures. But let's remind ourselves, of course, Gabe doesn't have any copies of Fling or Kazul's Fury in his sideboard.
That's one of those fascinating choices. I guess that particular team decided that the Fling is not changing a loss into a win that often. Sure, it's one of the cards you see people go for a lot to actually get that last few points of damage, but Nassif might, as is characteristic of Gabriel Nassif, he may have decided, if I find myself in that position, I can win the game just as effectively, if a little slower, by going for something like Negate, or by going for, something that even furthers my board presence that I can just attack for the win.
Here's a Shadow Skull Smashing. Going to go after both of these creatures here. Get rid of both the Fae of Wishes and the Bone Crusher Giant. Deal 6 apiece. Wow, look at that. Bam. Kabam. And now a huge attack opened up here. An attack for 13. And Gabe, in order probably to just save some time on that old chess clock as we were talking about there, he's happy enough to pack him up. And we go to game number 2. Shredded Sails comes in. Lotus Cobra comes out here for Aaron Gertler.
Just as deck construction before the event is fascinating, moving to sideboard can be fascinating also, because you have to weigh the pros and cons of, like, is this a card that's so good that I need access to it via my Fae of Wishes, or is it a card that's just good enough that I can omit that possibility and just put it in my deck to draw naturally? What's the relative speed that these things need to come into play, show up with? And yeah, I mean, I think usually you see pretty minimal sideboarding, but some 1s and 2s here and there can make a big difference.
And as is typical for this Adventures deck, you don't see too much sideboarding done. A very light touch. Given the fact that, the wish board means that you can't really afford to muck around with your sideboard too much. So look at the opener here for Gabe. I'm not sure about this one. It's lacking, it doesn't have much oomph to it here, does it?
It's painfully fair.
Yeah.
I mean, a normal, like, Magic 101, you keep this hand, right? Decent mix of lands and spells. You have a play you can make on turn 2. You defend yourself, you ramp your mana. You even have cycling lands. But the question is, do you need to do better in this matchup? Do you need the Lucky Clover? How much does the value of Lucky Clover change if it's after sideboarding and somebody might have some Shredded Sails? Looks like Nassif decided to keep it. I can't blame him.
Yeah, it's difficult to mulligan away a hand like this, but oh my goodness, it's going to be... everything's coming up Aaron right now with Lucky Clover in hand. Another one freshly off the top here. And while they can't be played on turn 2 because of all those tap lands, Aaron's going to be in a great position to leverage them as we move into the late game. Bone Crusher Giant, stomp upstairs. There's that turn 2 play. And now we'll see either a Fertile Footsteps or 4-3 come down.
So Nassif's going to be able to pull a little bit ahead on mana. Aaron, Yeah, the number of tapped lands that Aaron has drawn is a big deal. And Lucky Clover is a setup card, so it's not paying itself off just yet. So it's on Nassif to, see if he can use this window to gain some kind of advantage, and put himself in a decent position going into the mid game. Because you could see if both players are given enough time to play their cards, Aaron Gertler wins in a landslide. Nassif really doesn't have much going on, but if he can get Aaron Gertler to 8 before Aaron makes their first play, that's maybe something you can work with.
The problem here is, of course, that whenever you're trying to race against an Omnath deck, the fact that they can gain 4, maybe 8 life a turn cycle is just so oppressive, and it's one of the reasons that we don't see aggressive decks in anywhere near the same numbers that we used to. Mono red basically dead in the water. We need something like Gruul, which can push through huge amounts of damage as the game goes long. Granted here from Fae of Wishes.
Yeah, now I want to point out a fascinating decision that Gabriel Nassif made on his turn, which is, I think at face value, most of us take that turn by going Beanstalk Giant for an untapped land, pass with Stomp available. But I think Nassif has identified that, what I said a moment ago, he doesn't have the tools to win a long game here. If he gives Aaron Gertler enough time to cast the spells in his hand, to make use of this Lucky Clover, he's just going to lose. So what's the way to circumvent that, to find a different outcome for this game? And I think it involves just attacking that life total as quickly as possible. He casts the Bone Crusher Giant. Now Aaron Gertler is taking a turn off and finding Storm's Wrath, and let's see what Gabriel Nassif can accomplish if it's anything more than just an attack for 8.
The thing is, Aaron here has gone and got some cards from the sideboard that are going to take the pressure down from this onslaught. These Giants are getting busy. Aaron's down to 6, but now with Storm's Wrath, with Red Cap Melee in hand, he's in a decent spot to stem the bleeding somewhat here. He's been Stalk Giant with Fertile Steps, and not a whole lot else going on for Gabe. He can cycle away one of those triomes, but I mean, I like the line he's taken here. I just don't think it's going to pan out, considering that Aaron can clear the board next turn.
Yeah, I mean, let's be realistic. Gabriel Nassif had 3 spells this game. He used them to the best possible effectiveness to give himself the best chance of winning. But he's going to need more than this.
Certainly will. And this is not a deck that has a lot of reach. It's a deck that tends to win by miles rather than inches. Another Lucky Clover off the top here for Aaron. And you just fire off the Storm's Wrath here. I mean, you could go to...
I think
no, because even if you red cap Melee, you die. So
that's the play that Aaron set up. I think he committed himself to doing this when he chose the granted line on the previous turn. And yeah, I mean, if Gabriel Nassif somehow had Negate or Mystical Dispute in his hand, he would win the game on the spot. We know that that's not the case. The best he can do is cycle a Triome.
Yeah, so this Wrath is going to destroy both of these Giants here. And Nassif knows it, so away they go. I guess the other option was you play Omnath, play the Fabled Passage, and then you can gain some life. And crack it on your opponent's turn.
One turn late. Oh,
yeah, that's a real kick in the teeth, isn't it? That's a real kick in the teeth, man. Finding the Mystical Dispute a day late and $1 short. A day late and a dispute short here.
So he can make a big old Beanstalk Giant. He has Lucky Clover, which means if he finds another Bone Crusher Giant, that's a lot of direct damage. But we know that Aaron Gertler is very likely to use Omnath to gain some life. Aaron would actually, he really wants to find another land off the top so that he can play Omnath, make a land drop, and use the Fabled Passage to re-up the mana.
Here's a 7/7. Bone Crusher Giant off the top here for Aaron, who now has Omnath. No land in hand, but does have the Fabled Passage ready to go. Draws another Omnath.
Very crucial missed land drop. I think this game would have been basically Aaron's to win or lose if he had found a land there. As it stands, I mean, he's still clawing. That's a big Beanstalk Giant. Oh, and Nassif with a big draw step too. This game got interesting.
Escape to the Wilds now here. Let's see how much this might change. And you can see Nassif laser-like focus here as he fires off this sorcery. Let's see what he can rip off the top with this with these 5 cards. Innkeeper Fade, Bony G, Banishing Light as well has come in from the board.
Wow, we're close here, Riley, because the double land drop makes the giant a 9/9.
It does.
A Lucky Clover and a Bone Crusher Giant removes the Omnath from the battlefield, but Nassif is he has a tapped land, so he can't make that play. I guess he could Banishing Light the Omnath. Looks like he's content to basically force a chump block.
Does he have an untapped land for the Banishing Light? I think he's one short of the Banishing Light play there.
Okay, you're right.
So he plays Edgewall Innkeeper instead. I think we're going to see perhaps no, wow, look at this. Another missed land drop for Aaron Gertler, who seemed to have it in hand, and now this pressure that Gabe has been putting on him.
He's hovering over Omnath. If he plays into the Mystical Dispute, this game is over.
Oh, yeah, of course. There's that Mystical Dispute that Gabe drew just a day late. So now, with no way to pay for that Mystical Dispute here, I mean, this is the one card that Gabe can still play, and he's masked it marvelously as well by playing just play my Edgewall Innkeeper. I don't have anything else to play. Your turn, mate. Go ahead.
Right. If you remember, Nassif clearly did not have the Mystical Dispute when Storm's Wrath resolved.
Yeah.
Then the next turn he tapped out for Beanstalk Giant. So Aaron Gertler has absolutely no way of knowing there's a Mystical Dispute in Nassif's hands.
And I think
of course he's thinking about it. He's a sharp player, but he may or may not decide to play around it.
Now, Escape to the Wilds cannot be countered by Mystical Dispute because, of course, it's not a blue spell. So this one is going to resolve here. But, okay, there's a land, and I think... oh, no, just going to pack them up. All right, with the Bone Crusher Giant revealed, there's no chump block available here. And that means that Gabe Nassif, who you'll remember, in the early turns, fired off those Bone Crusher Giants in order to put as much pressure on as possible. And that is just a textbook example of someone recognizing their role in a matchup, or not even a matchup, in a specific game based on the way that the cards fell. Gabe drew a pretty mediocre opener, but he used it to the best of his ability. He sort of turned the texture of the game on its head by taking the role of an aggro deck read.
Yeah, I love it. That was just an awesome strategic game to watch. If we polled the people involved in this tournament, our commentary team, the players, the viewers, everyone would say that Aaron Gertler had the cards to win that game. Lucky Clover just being so strong. He had more gas in the tank, and Nassif just playing super fair with, just vanilla creatures.
Turn 3, 4-3. Turn 4, 4-3. Attack. Yeah.
But it's those subtleties, man. It's the die roll. It's Aaron Gertler's land entering the battlefield tapped at the wrong time. It's the Beanstalk Giant not having a direct answer, and Nassif able to take that one. Awesome stuff.
Yeah, it was huge there, and Aaron, look, full credit to him. He certainly he was playing a much more orthodox game, but Gabriel Nassif, I mean, he's going to have trouble. I'm not sure which room he's in there. I don't know. I hope it's got double doors because his enormous brain is going to make it very difficult for him to fit through a doorway after having won that game.
The one decision that I think could have impacted the outcome from Aaron's perspective is what card he searched for with his second Granted. He copied Granted on turn 4. Yes. He was definitely going for Storm's Wrath. He followed up with a red cap melee, which makes sense. Just take the most efficient possible spell. But, in a different world, if he had searched for something that might have answered the Beanstalk Giant, maybe it's a different game, but that's the judgment call you make in the face of uncertainty.
Now, this is a rough start here for Gabe, who is mulligan to 5 now. But as far as 5s go, this is about as good as it gets. Look at this 5-card hand.
Yeah, I mean, you give me 3 lands, Lucky Clover, Beanstalk Giant, I probably take that 5 every game.
Now, here, the question that Gabe's pondering now is, do you take the 3rd land or do you take the Escape to the Wilds?
He's on the draw, and one of the lands. So, yeah, I mean,
it's tough.
You want these 6 cards. You want these 6 cards in one form or another. The play that maximizes the chance is bottoming a land because, you're overwhelmingly more likely to draw 1 land than to draw specifically one of your 2 remaining Escape to the Wilds.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and he's doing what he can here.
I like this, and if he finds a land in the top couple of cards, he's going to be in business here. He's still got a couple of draw steps to find it. Lucky Clover on turn 2 here for Aaron. And it's going to be the same story for Gabe, who whiffs on the land. He's got one more chance here. I mean, it's not over if he misses the land drop on turn 3, but he still really, really wants to hit it so he can fire off that Beanstalk Giant.
I think, you know, just as like a very oversimplification, we can probably say it's over if he misses the land on turn 4.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that bad if he just plays another Clover on this turn and then hopes to draw to cast Beanstalk Giant. But if it's turn 5 before he makes his first relevant play, I do not think he can win the game.
Bit of a whiff there, but the second Lucky Clover kind of makes up for it, right? Because if there's an untapped land next turn, then the Beanstalk Giant can go and fetch 3 untapped lands. So still in with a sniff here. But Gabe does need an untapped land, especially in the face of this Omnath. You can
Here
see
it is, Riley. Untapped land.
One time.
It could have been untapped land, Beanstalk Giant for 3 lands, triple Bone Crusher. I mean, he can still remove the Omnath, so that's definitely something.
That's something. But does really, really need that third land. Oh man, without it, he's really, really swimming against the tide here. So, Escape the Wilds here for Aaron, whose game plan is progressing reasonably well, even after the loss of that Omnath. Finds a Fabled Passage. And is going to have a lot of stuff to do next turn. Off the top. All right, there it is. Okay, back in it. So, Beanstalk Giant, Fertile Footsteps now. Go and get 3 untapped lands. And this actually puts Gabe in a decent enough spot. He definitely would have preferred to have found that untapped land last time. But hey, at least he didn't whiff once again.
Yeah, I said that this was going to be one turn too late. I would be one of the happiest to be proven wrong here, and I think Nassif's going to at least get to play. I don't know if he's going to be able to come back after losing this much in terms of tempo and number of lands on the battlefield. Aaron even had quite a good Escape to the Wilds, as he's going to be able to match this play next turn with his own Clover and Beanstalk Giant.
Well, that's true, actually. Yeah, you can see waiting in the wings, a Lucky Clover plus another Beanstalk Giant flipped off of the Escape here. And Gabe, thinking about playing out this 4-3, I think he's going to. This is the one that was used to kill the Omnath previously, the Boney G.
Yeah, I don't see much better to do than that. He's thinking about, well, what happens if I pass with Bone Crusher Giant open? Is it going to be necessary to kill maybe an Omnath or an Edgewall Innkeeper at instant speed? Definitely could be, but you know, I don't mind just spending your mana and progressing your game plan.
So a land now off of that flip 5. And playing the Lucky Clover into Beanstalk Giant here is, I mean, the Beanstalk Giant replaced itself. The lands that you tap to play it, you just get back straight away. And the Lucky Clover, a good investment for future turns. The question is, where do you want to put this mana? Into a Fae of Wishes? Go and get some cards out of the sideboard here. The Mystical Dispute we can kind of write off as a non-factor here. It's a bit of a Blanksky, not the sort of card you want to rip off of an Escape to the Wilds.
I agree.
That Beanstalk Giant.
I think Aaron's priority here is he wants to get whatever value he can out of these Fae of Wishes before they go away. So one way to do that, if you know, maybe for somebody like me who lacks creativity, you could just play your Edgewall Innkeepers and then play your Fae of Wishes and draw some cards. Alternatively, you could grant it, you know, and then they'll be in the adventure zone. You're not going to lose them, and you're going to fill up your hand. Both plays seem really, really good to me. And even some kind of like hybridization where you wish with one and hardcast another, that would be fine too.
Well, there's definitely going to be a wish with one of them. Here's granted now. You can see the various options. Lotus Cobra has hit the sideboard, post board. It's not an option, but anything else, fair game. Escape to the Wilds and negate. And finally, pick up perhaps a neutralize here. Once in future, maybe, if you want to play a longer game. Depends how reactive you want to be in this position. Certainly you can turtle up behind some counter spells when you're this far ahead.
Although there's an interesting dynamic, which we talked about in game number 1, which is whoever had the most recent turn tends to feel like they're ahead. So all fine and good if you're way ahead, you want to go wish for a negate and pass the turn with it. But what I would be careful of is wishing for a negate when you're tapped out and crossing your fingers that you're still going to be ahead the next time you untap. And that's what has happened here. I think it's totally fine. You know, Aaron with so many resources at his disposal, just going for a cheap, efficient card in the negate, he's going to be able to use that in the long run. But here we have the window. Nassif needs to get himself onto the board in a way that's convincing enough that he's not just dead to the negate in the long run.
Okay, he's going to open the account here with what looks like an escape to the wilds, potentially. Both players here playing fully juiced up here, both of them fully talked with a pair of Lucky Clovers apiece. And it's going to be Escape to the Wilds. Ooh, a third Lucky Clover, Omnath, and a stack of lands. So I could play out that Lucky Clover here, but if you let Aaron Gertler untap, he's kind of just going to go a bit bonkers here with this another copy of Escape to the Wilds. Yeah, this was, I mean, it was a fine turn from Gabe, but it's certainly not keeping pace with what Aaron's up to.
Right. He can Shredded Sails one of the two Clovers. I mean, that's not your favorite. Like, you're it's easy enough to lose to two copies of an adventure card that reducing it from 3 copies to 2 copies is not that exciting. But, it's something you could do. You're just spending your mana.
Bone Crusher Giant gets in for a stack of damage here, in addition to, of course, the stomp that took care of that Edgewood Innkeeper with a 4 damage kicker.
Excuse me, I think I misread the Bone Crusher Giant as a Shredded Sail. So scratch what I said about using your mana is fine, but Shredded Sails seem to have not been a play available to Nassif that turn.
Certainly is a play available to Aaron Gertler, however, with 2 copies, one in the exile zone, one in his hand. So he actually could remove, no, not after that. Okay, no red mana available here after that, but with another land drop, could play one of the Shredded Sails here. Let's see what he decides to do. Can still play a land in order to trigger Omnath once again. Just such a hard card to race as well. Back up to 14 there with that first trigger. And there's a pathway. And that key red mana here. Well, maybe we'll go for a Beanstalk Giant instead. And turning off auto tap here because a misstep with mana could prove to be devastating.
I think it's a fine decision. You're about to reach the championship match of the grand finals. Saying goodbye to that auto tapper on a temporary basis is not a bad idea.
Seems reasonable, yes. There you go. Pop it back on real quick. And no more basic lands to search up with the final copy of Fertile Footsteps there. So here's Shredded Sails now. Remove one of those copies of Lucky Clover. I don't think there's any more red mana available, or was a mountain fetched? Oh, excuse me, there was a... Yeah, okay, so a mountain enables the second Shredded Sails, and that is really devastating here for Nassif. It's good that he fired off that stomp when he did to get the full value from it here.
So boy,
the Frenchman.
I mean, what a turn. Omnath, Shredded Sails, find a way to pass with 2 mana open for negate. Really putting the screws to Nassif. He's going to have to thread the needle if he wants to stay in this game without playing into that negate.
So there's Omnath and a Fabled Passage to go with it as well. Perfect. Back up to 20. And what's his next play? His hand is a little light on action. You can see that Lucky Clover there hanging out still after an escape to the wilds. I mean, that might be a target for a negate. Certainly is a very, a threatening card that needs to be respected.
Yeah, it seems fine to play that, force the negate. Remember, these are Escape to the Wilds exile cards, so use it or lose it.
Fabled Passage triggers Omnath a second time, putting that mana into Gabe's pool here. And you could just, I mean, the negate's there. That's the other thing. The negate is face up for Gabe. So it's not as if he's going to run blind into it. maybe just ignore it completely and just build out your board. Yeah, the line he's taking here, Beanstalk Giant. Still got, no, not quite enough mana to do anything else. Offers the trade, not going to take it. Down to 10 once again, Aaron Gertler. And you just fire off the Lucky Clover here? I mean, it is a use it or lose it situation.
Yeah, I don't see any reason not to.
Yeah, there's Snap Negate here from Aaron. And I mean, that's fine. You were discarding that that Clover anyway, so... Escape to the Wilds off the top here for Aaron. Yeah, once again, great draw. Sorry, go ahead.
Excellent prospects here with the Omnath, you know, on track to double trigger for additional mana. I mean, look how many cards Aaron has in his Adventure Zone with double Edgewall Innkeeper. So there's no running out of gas here. It's just a matter of how mana efficient can he be and what can he do to make sure Gabriel Nassif's game plan is shut down.
So Omnath gains 4 and then adds 4 mana. And we've got an Escape to the Wilds waiting at the ready here for Aaron after that first one was fired off.
Shatter Skull Smashing. That's
options.
A potentially big one. I like the ability to take out Omnath.
Escape to the Wilds the play, however. And 2 more copies of Fabled Passage here.
So, if I understand correctly, it would cost you 9 mana to Shatter Skull Smashing the Beanstalk Giant and the Omnath. 9 mana would give you 14 damage off Shatter Skull Smashing. Brazen Borrower is a fine alternative as well, especially now that the Lucky Clover is off the battlefield. You don't have to sweat so much bouncing adventure creatures.
Yeah, this clears the board quite nicely here for Gertler. And we'll make Gabe pick up all those cards. And now just kind of got his run of the henhouse here as he can continue to spew cards out. Double Edgewall Innkeeper, as if there weren't enough cards in hand already.
All right, zero cards in hand, Riley. I don't know what you're talking about.
Excuse me. Sorry, yeah. Oh, look at that. Oh. Bargain bin commentary here. Riley Knight absolutely he's only opening his mouth to change feet today, my friends. And in comes the Omnath, Gabe down to 12. And it is kind of tricky to tell like which cards are where. All those cards right now that you can see on the right-hand side they're all in the Exile Zone, but some of them are adventures and some of them are not. You're going to see more cards out of the hand here with the Giant Killer.
Our colleague Paul Cheon yesterday said something that I found incredibly valuable. If you see the yellow fire background around an adventure card, that means that it's exiled in the Adventure Zone. And that's a great way to distinguish between exiled via Adventure and exiled via Escape to the Wilds.
So those 2 Beanstalk Giants on the left and the Brazen Borrower on the right here, they're on adventures, whereas the Bone Crusher Giant, the Beanstalk Giant in the middle, they were flipped by the Escape to the Wilds, right?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Excellent. Quick shout out to the UX UI design people for Wizards for not making that a color coded bit of information. There are certain games that do use color tags for that sort of stuff, which makes it very difficult for colorblind people like myself to tell. So now, please, Watsy, just change the cards in deck thing away from red text, and I'll be very happy. It's impossible to tell. If you don't have 60 cards in your deck, it's impossible to tell how many you've got when you're colorblind. And now we're back to Gabe, who has gained some mana off that Omnath. And with an Escape to Wilds in hand here, can also build out his own resources, although I don't know if he's going to get quite the treasure trove that Aaron Gertler's got.
We're short of something like Ugin coming down. Actually, are we? That works. That works.
Okay, Storm's Wrath's going to clean things up very nicely. Yes, indeed. Takes the board back to parity here. And that was, remember, after Aaron bounced all of Gabe's creatures as well.
Yeah, it's true. I think Gabe having a strong hand is nice, but it's not necessarily going to be the determining factor in this game, because this is more a contest of just who can play things faster. We joked a moment ago, Aaron Gertler, not actually that many cards in hand, but at his fingertips, dozens and dozens of cards, dozens and dozens of options, untapping first, having the triple lucky clover, having more lands. I think it means that Aaron Gertler is going to have another great turn, and the best Nassif can hope for is to untap and be facing a similar situation again next turn.
I mean, quad clover as well, if he so chooses. That Bone Crusher Giant is 2 mana for 10 damage.
Wow.
I mean, if there were a way to bounce that back to hand, the game would be over on the spot.
It
is just a casual 17-17.
We are cleaned out of Fae of Wishes from Aaron Gertler's side, which that's something, I guess. I mean, it means Aaron Gertler has many, many great options, but they are limited. They are not infinite. He cannot access his fling to win the game immediately.
That's key. That's key. The fact that the fling is now kind of off limits here. So Lucky Clover. And as I said before, Bone Crusher Giant is, look at this, 10 damage. This is bloody Hidetsugu's third right here. It's all going upstairs. Kabam! Look at that. That's a lot of damage there, Reed. That's a lot of damage.
I'm thinking back to something you told us earlier, Riley, which is that Gabriel Nassif does not have access to Fling or Kazul's Fury anywhere. Mm-hmm. So I might, under these ordinary circumstances, think like maybe this is his way to steal it against an opponent at 12. But, even if somehow he could piece together Fae of Wishes and Beanstalk Giant, I don't think he's going to be able to find a way to have lethal here.
No, it's going to be really tough. Looks like Nassif is going to cast a Stomp of his own. Is that right? Not quite as impressive as the one that was just cast before. Wow. Only 2 damage? Only 2 damage. Gabe, get on Aaron's level, mate. Quad Clover doing incredible work here for Aaron Gertler. Does have Brazen Borrower to remove that Beanstalk Giant.
Yeah, that's big. It means that's a turn you don't have the chump block.
Yeah, but still. Tap dancing on an avalanche here is Gabriel Nassif. He's going to find it tricky to stay above board, keep his snoot above water. And let's just check in on the old chess clock situation here. You can see Gabe with 4 minutes remaining.
Wow.
And Aaron with 7.
It's pretty interesting. Like, for the first time in the game, I think we can say that if both players had enough time to cast all their spells, Gabriel Nassif actually might have a chance to win.
Yeah.
Which that's a big change from what we had earlier. If Aaron Gertler just bricks, draws all, say, Fabled Passages for the rest of the game, which is a big if, right? He does have a Triome to cycle at the end of the turn, if nothing else. But if Nassif can survive and then hope that Aaron Gertler runs out of gas somehow. I wonder if there's something.
Got that yellow hat time appearing in the chat. You know that's never a good sign for Gabriel Nassif. Get that yellow hat time happening. My goodness.
Yeah, Aaron Gertler said it. He said it in his pre-match interview that time was going to be a factor here.
Yep, this is a classic situation here for Gabriel Nassif. His oldest and most hated foe, the clock. It is back here. Down to just 3 minutes. He's scrabbling to keep himself in this game. And now
he prioritized the 1/4 blockers, knowing that Aaron Gertler could flash in a half-lethal Brazen Borrower at the end of the turn. Mm-hmm. Ooh, here's a good bit of action for Gertler.
Yeah,
the Innkeeper representing, no less than 5 cards here, and that's it, Riley.
Oh, a Bone Crusher Giant here is another 10 damage for Aaron Gertler. A timely rip here. And Gabriel Nassif is knocked down to the lower bracket as Aaron Gertler becomes our first contender to make it all the way to the championship match. Well done, Aaron Gertler. We'll be seeing more of him later on. What an impressive performance from someone who knows this deck back to front, in and out. Reed, he's put himself in a fantastic position to dominate this tournament. Wow.
Yeah, no kidding. The guy who told us that he was 4-4 at one point in the event yesterday, facing elimination, he has now won 7 matches in a row to find himself waiting in the upper bracket of the championship match.